Surah 1 verse 7, also the last verse in this surah known as Surah Al-Fatiha. Now you have to understand the last verse said, guide us to the straight path. So this is a continuation of that. Guide us to a straight path, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace, not of those who have earned your anger, nor of those who went astray. So in looking at this, the whole point we're trying to say, let's break it down to the first part, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace. We always follow examples of people throughout history. For instance, Martin Luther King followed his non-violence part from Gandhi. And we always follow stuff that our parents taught us and from our environments. So, you're more likely to be like your parents in the way of your thinking. And in your environments, for example, if you went to a high school where there was like always this cool kid that you were influenced by, because you thought that's how you have to be cool. So we always follow examples of people in history. But we ask God to guide us on those people who have bestowed his grace. So this is where we separate true prophets from false prophets. We ask him to give us the ways and the knowledge of the true prophets. Now, how do you separate true prophets from false prophets? It's ego versus knowledge. Some people are in a position where they offer so much knowledge and people start listening to them that eventually their ego goes high and they worry more about how to get that power. They become obsessed with power. So an example of a true prophet, the prophet that we follow in Islam, is Muhammad, peace be upon him. And in him, he was a homeless prophet. He was not a rich prophet. So for him, it wasn't about power and all this stuff. It was knowledge. A false prophet in history would be Jim Jones, who convinced 918 of his followers to commit suicide in Guyana in 1978. So there you see an example of a false prophet and a true prophet. So we always ask to be followed in the examples of true prophets. Now, the next two parts of this verse go hand in hand. Not of those who earned your anger, nor of those who went astray. So there's a relation here. People who go astray, who go away from the straight path, is because they as humans fall into their temptations and pleasures. Whether this has to do with examples such as eating a lot, gluttony, lust, greed, the seven sins that that kind of are universal throughout all religions. So let's take an example. Someone might say, well, when you listen to your body and stuff, that's called being free. For example, someone might argue monogamy does not offer the human being freedom. So let's say the human being in this kind of thinking falls under all his pleasures. Well, things have consequences. That's why morality has consequences. For example, if you fall under the category of wanting to have so much lust that you practice polygamy with many different people, then tell me why biology gives the consequence of STDs. Because you can practice polygamy, but it comes at a price. And STDs can cause deaths, and deaths cause the human race to be wiped out. So, and that is against the principle which we talked about earlier, survival of the fittest. That is the whole point of the human life, is survival of the fittest. And so, when you look at this verse, when you go astray, that is talking about falling into sins, and the anger that we talk about from God is the consequences. There's consequences to everything. If you fall under greed, you make a lot of money, you start misusing people to get money. Because we all know at the higher levels of the world, it requires greed. It requires you to take money from when you've outused all your resources, you take money in the most immoral ways.